Oh, but now hold it a minute. In my mouth, that saliva is wonderful. Separate it by a second, even less. Put it in that glass. It's suddenly vile.
Hmm.
Why is that,
Why is that?
Henry?
Interesting
Why
question.
is that?
Um,
Why is that? Now, the next time somebody comes along and they change a definition, for example, here in America, we're seeing lots of definitions change. We no longer have a war on terror. Uh, you know, uh, we no longer have enemy combatants. We're doing things like preventive detention. Ask yourself, why are they changing the definitions? Why are they changing the labels? What is going on? What happens to me automatically when they label something in a certain way? And remember, when you ask that question, how is it possible that the saliva in my mouth and the spit in that glass and that difference can be that different in my mind?
that is an interesting question. Has it something to do? Well, you mentioned the separation. It belongs in one place, but when it ends up in another, then you have a different relationship basically with that thing that you've been separated from. That's my answer to that, but I don't know.
Well, but that's context, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
you just basically, it's just, we're all educated, unfortunately, to think of things in black or white. So you go to school and you're taught that 1 and 1 equals 2.
Yeah.
You're not taught that 1 and 1 equals 2 within the arithmetic system as a necessary a priori, but not necessarily 1 and 1 equals 2 in the real world. But because you're not taught that, when I take a gallon of alcohol and a gallon of water and I add them together and you don't have 2 gallons, you're amazed.
Mm.
You're astounded.
Mm.
Okay?
Mm.
Here, you know what a scavenger hunt is, Henry? Do you have scavenger hunts in Sweden?
No. Well, tell us about that. What is that? Scavenger hunt.
Okay, a scavenger hunt, maybe you're at a party and everybody at the party is giving a list of things. And this list of things has got, a coat and a football and an apple. You have this list of things, and the scavenger hunt idea is, okay, everybody runs out with their list, and the first one back to have filled the list, have everything on that list, wins a prize. Okay,
I see what you mean.
All right?
Yeah. Yep.
We call those scavenger hunts, all right?
Got it.
Now, so I want you to imagine that a friend of yours comes to your door tonight. They knock on your door and they say, Henry, I'm in a scavenger hunt, this contest. I can win $10,000 if you've got a 3x7 piece of wood. Can you help me with that? You think, I haven't got a wood pile. I'm sorry. And you close your 3x7 wood door.
I see what you mean.
It's a door.
Yeah.
It's not a piece of wood, see?
Right.
I mean, and the bottom line is, when you understand all of these constraints that the mind works with, then you begin to understand how easy it is to cause people to march to the drum of someone else,
yes,
as opposed to themselves.
So ultimately, what does this tell us about the nature of the mind, or the brain rather? Is obviously the brain then is more perceptive than our conscious awareness is, and I've heard, and maybe you can talk about that elsewhere, that it doesn't matter if something is backwards or upside down, diagonally, mirrored, reversed, or what have you. The mind will always absorb all of this. The question is if you're consciously aware of it. Is that a correct assumption?
Well, yes and no. I'll equivocate just a little bit. I mean, we're going to process the information. The mind is processing the information all the time.
Mm.
The adaptive unconscious, for all intent and purposes, I indicated earlier, is processing millions of bits of information that the conscious mind is not aware of. And this is going on all the time. And that part of us that is the automatic part, it attends to the somatic nature of, all of our body functions. It attends to information that is not relevant but could become relevant. I mean, you're at a party and you're in a conversation. There's lots of people around you and they're all talking, lots of noise, but the only thing you hear is the conversation with the person you're having, when suddenly Sydney, someone you know, but maybe you're not too fond of, says your name.
Right.
And you hear that. Bang, you know? Now, you didn't hear anything Sidney said up until he said your name, but the minute he said your name, it comes to your conscious attention. Well, that automatic part of you is being, operated without conscious awareness. And so your question, are we processing, all this information that we're not consciously aware? The answer is absolutely. Are we processing meaningful information, or are we making it meaningful? Well, it depends on the nature of the information. Obviously, in our hypothetical, when Sidney said your name, that was meaningful to you. That got your attention. You're driving down the highway, you're on automatic, you're thinking about whatever you're thinking about. You haven't even thought of the highway in, who knows, 10 or 15 minutes. Suddenly your exit sign on the freeway is coming. Bang, you snap out of it and realize, I've been on automatic all the time I was having. Every human being has experienced these kinds of things. So, you can, indeed, most people have experienced, I'm driving down the road, and maybe I'm on the freeway and I'm thinking, and I begin to hum a song or think about a song and maybe begin to move to it, and I reach over to turn on the radio, and the radio was on. It was just real low, and the song that I'm humming, well, that's the song that's playing. So these things come into our conscious awareness when there is relevance to them. Now, this study that I told you about that's recently been done that shows the impact of negative messages would suggest to us that we're going to be more vigilant about attending to the negative messages or the negative possibilities, and perhaps that's an outgrowth of our evolution system, because from just a preservation of the species standpoint, negative messages, dangerous messages, we should be probably a little more vigilant towards. But for whatever reason, we are. Now, we know this. There are all kinds of studies that have been run where you pair a negative word to a flag or to the face of an individual, and you pair a positive word. And invariably, we will see this information predispose your judgment of the country or of the individual. So we are attending to this information, even though we're not consciously aware of it, and it is influencing our choices. In my book, Choices and Illusions, I quoted something that Krishnamurti has said and then expounded on that, but it goes this way. Choice is an illusion. When we know clearly what we want to do, there is no choice. Choice arises only as a result of confusion. If you think about the human condition and you think about the amalgam of stimulus that we all process on a daily basis, the millions and millions of bits of information, including everything that is that somebody is trying to sell us on billboards, on pop-ups, on our laptops, on our smartphone screens, everywhere we turn, somebody is trying to sell us something. It's a political point of view, it's a propaganda message, or it's a product, a piece of goods. All of that information is being processed, and it does indeed give rise to creating the alternatives by which we choose from. And much of the confusion that we live in our world, in our life, isn't about real things. It isn't about, a saber-toothed tiger, do I run or do I fight? It is about, gosh, I don't know, maybe I should buy this tomato sauce instead of that tomato sauce. Or,
right.
It can be over ridiculous things. But it nevertheless causes a sense of stress and this sense of confusion that leads us away from, to me, what is the ultimate question, and that's, who are you and why are you here? Because it's not just to consume, is it?
No, of course not. Absolutely not. It's to have an experience to live our lives and to learn and to grow. And the question is, obviously, that arises there is, well, how do we do to break free in a way from the spell that we've been talking a little bit, and that is something that I want to get in to in more detail with you, Eldon, here in our next segment.